All right, last video, because this is actually the last of the anatomy clips for Unit 1. So we're going to take a look at a few more anatomical features you need to know. I'm going to take this view of the human here and rotate it around so we can see the posterior side. So here on the posterior side, guess what I'm zooming in on? Right here, these are going to be our kidneys. So you guys may already know that the kidneys are more posterior. Within the posterior portion of your abdominopelvic cavity. So I'm rotating this around so you can kind of get a pretty good 3D perspective of where they're located. A lot of people are surprised when they first take an anatomy and physiology class about how high up, though, how superior the kidneys are in that posterior section of the abdominopelvic cavity. They're a lot higher up than many people imagine. All right, so there is, now we're on a posterior view here. So this is the left kidney, that is the right kidney, and so we'll deselect those. And then I want you to also notice above those, let me get rid of a couple of the ribs here. I'm going to get rid of some of these vertebrae as well. And I'm going to ditch the diaphragm here, doing some dissections. Okay. Notice right here you've got those yellowish brown structures, which I've now highlighted in blue. They look like hats sitting on top of the kidneys. Those are the adrenal glands, which make various hormones. You'll learn about those next semester, including adrenaline. You've all heard of an adrenaline rush before, and so that is one of the hormones made by those two glands that sit up there on top of the kidneys. Interestingly, the kidneys are actually retroperitoneal, which means they're actually behind the parietal peritoneum. They're not within the portion of the abdominopelvic cavity that's lined by that serous membrane. They're actually sitting behind it and surrounded by some fatty tissue, even though that's not shown here in this particular view. All right, and then connected to your kidneys, I'm going to zoom in here, and again, we're looking at the back. But if you see here, you've got a tube there and a tube there. That's the tube. So the kidneys filter your blood and they make urine that contains wastes that you're going to excrete from your bloodstream. And so that urine forms in the kidneys and then it travels down the left and the right ureters or ureters headed to the bladder. So it's got a pretty good, those tubes extend for a pretty long distance. Let me dissect some things off of the front side over here so we can, you know what, I think I just eliminated the ureters by doing that. So let me pause and bring them back up. All right, I'm going to do some dissection here and remove large and small intestines so that we can see the structures that are deeper there in the abdominopelvic cavity. Get rid of the duodenum there. All right, so there's your right kidney, there's the left kidney over here. Part of that one's hidden by the stomach. And then there's a ureter or ureter, and then the one over there on the left. And if we continue down here, this is actually a female model. So those two tubes are connecting into this structure right there in blue. That's the bladder. And so let me hide the pelvic bones. And that is actually a little piece of cartilage that connects your two pelvic bones. That's a lymph node. I'm going to hide that for now. I also hid the bladder. Hang on, let me bring it back up. All right, there we go, we're back. Okay, so this is your urinary bladder, and let me kind of rotate it around so that you can see how it's positioned. They're down deep in the pelvic cavity. You are down in the bowl of the pelvis here. And of course, there's your left and your right ureter connected to the bladder. Okay, so urine is of course stored in your bladder, as you guys know, and then it has to enter a tube that carries it to the opening to the outside. So this is on a female. And that tube right there is called the urethra, if you're following in your study guide. And you can see that the urethra is anterior, thinking about this female model here in a anatomical position, to a passageway underneath it. Let me deselect the urethra. That is the vagina. And then there's the opening of the vagina to the outside world. Opening of the urethra to the outside world is right here. Okay, so it's actually, now if this female was lying down, you might think, okay, well the urethra is superior, the opening to the urethra is superior to the opening to the vagina. But if you think about, you always think about a subject in anatomy in anatomical position like this, so that opening for the urethra right there through which urine is going to flow is actually considered to be anterior to the opening for the vagina. All right, and we'll deselect all of those. Let me hide the bladder here for a second. Or let me fade it so you can see. Rotate this around this way. Let me hide. There's your femur, your thigh bone. Let me hide that. I'll hide some of these blood vessels. Knock those out of the way so we can see things a little bit better. Okay, so we took our bladder out here. I'm going to bring that one back, actually. Okay, I brought my bladder back here now. And the reason I did that is I want to show you, okay, so we mentioned before that that tube, that's the vagina, and then the vagina connects to the uterus in a female. Okay, and so there's the uterus, everything I'm highlighting there. There are 3 sections to it, which you'll learn about next semester. That's the uterus. Notice that the uterus is superior to the urinary bladder, and you could also say it's posterior because the urinary bladder in a female extends in an anterior direction a little bit, since this is anterior side of the body over here, posterior side over there. Okay, so you can kind of see why it should be obvious to you now if a woman is pregnant and she has a developing fetus in her uterus that is going to be pressing down on the bladder. Okay, you deselect that. Okay, other structures over here, right there and over here on this side. Each of those is an ovary. Let me highlight that one again so you can kind of see those and how they're positioned. Move this over. There's your right ovary right there, and I'm going to deselect it. It's right there. This pink tube, of course, that's connecting the ovary to the uterus is the fallopian tube. And that is actually not on your, double check that, that's not actually on your study guide here for Unit 1, but so you don't have to know that, but since you have to know ovary and uterus, it's good to see the fallopian tube that connects them as well. All right, let me pause this for a second because I want to bring up the corresponding structures on a male. Okay, now we'll take a look at the male pelvic region. Of course, males, you have the penis and these bluish egg-shaped structures there. Those are the testes where sperm cells are made. And of course, those are located in the scrotum, which hangs outside of the body. But those are the testes. Those are your main reproductive organs in a male. And let me deselect those. And let me hide some things here. Let's strip away some of our muscle here so we can see what's going on inside. I will try not to dissect off the bladder. All right, so we've stripped away a lot of structures there. All right, so there's the bladder in a male. And then right there and right there, I'll zoom in. That's your left and your right ureter or ureter, and those of course extend up to the kidneys, just like in a female. All right, now how about the urethra in a male? Of course, that's going to be a little bit different. The urethra actually passes out of, let me raise this up, out of the bladder. Let me hide some other things there. Here's your bladder. Urine passes out of that into the urethra, and the first part of the urethra extends inside this kind of heart-shaped structure you see right there. That's actually the prostate gland, which you don't have to be able to identify right now, but we'll hide that. And so you see this tube over here, that's the urethra, which was actually inside the prostate gland that I just eliminated. And then the urethra continues on into the penis in the male. So we'll get rid of some of these structures so we can see it. There it is on the inside. So there it is. There's the urethra that's passing through the interior of the penis in the male, and of course then the opening of the urethra is there on at the tip or the end of the penis. Okay, and I believe I've covered everything. Did we do everything? We didn't do the spleen. Hang on just a second. Let me bring the spleen up for you. I'm going to have to bring up a different view because the spleen, I think, has been stripped off of this particular view. Yes, it has. Let me bring that up for you. Okay, I've got this view of the abdominopelvic cavity back up now, and I'm going to hide some things. Let me hide the stomach. Strip that away. There's the pancreas back there behind the stomach. I'm going to hide some of these ribs. We're going to dissect those off. And I'm going to highlight, there's the diaphragm. I'm going to hide that. And right here, you guys see that little purple shaped organ, which is on the lateral superior left side of the abdominopelvic cavity. Up there in the LUQ, there's your spleen. The spleen is an important organ for filtering your blood. It helps get rid of old, worn-out red blood cells that need to be replaced. So it's a very good blood filtering organ that you have there. Okay? Last thing, the lymphatic system. All right, let me just show you here on this diagram. Typically on anatomical diagrams, the lymphatic system, which is a system of vessels that drain excess tissue fluids out of your tissues and return those fluids to your bloodstream, they're typically drawn in green. So anywhere where you're seeing these green vessels that I'm now highlighting, let me deselect those. These green vessels that I'm highlighting in blue, those tubes there, those are lymphatic vessels. Any of those. Those extend all throughout the body. Deselect those. And then where you see these little knots, those little clusters, those are lymph nodes. And lymph nodes are areas where the fluids that are draining off of your tissues get filtered, And you have white blood cells actually in there that stay in there like little soldiers, and they're looking for things like bacteria and viruses that are trying to invade your body. Okay, so your lymph nodes are simply named for the regions where they're located. You have them scattered throughout the body, but there are areas like right down in here in the pelvis and the groin. You have little clusters of lots of them, and they're named according to the body regions. So for example, these are your inguinal lymph nodes, like they're showing you up here. And if I go up higher on the body, you've got a whole cluster of lymph nodes here, and many of those are called your axillary lymph nodes because they're in the armpits over here and over here. You have cervical lymph nodes up in here and over here, since the cervical region is the neck. So if on the lab exam I'm pointing to lymph nodes in the neck, you would call those cervical lymph nodes. If I'm pointing to lymph nodes in the groin, you would call those inguinal lymph nodes. They're named according to their body regions. You have some on the back side of your knee. Do you remember the regional term for the back side of your knee? That is popliteal or popliteal. So that's all you need to know right now for lymphatic vessels and lymph nodes. All right, so that finishes up this particular video clip, and that should conclude all of our anatomy for Unit 1. So congratulations, you've made it through the whole thing.